What if the man that you saw bent over in a field or selling vegetables was once a prince? Not in title, but in birthright, in education, in power. This is the story of Abdul Rahman Ibrahima Sori, a West African royal, heir to a kingdom, who spent 40 years enslaved in Mississippi. But even in chains, he never lost his crown. If stories like this move you, stories that challenge what you think you know about Black history, then hit the subscribe button. There's more where this came from. Now, let's go back to 1788 to the story of Abdul Rahman Ibrahima Sori, an African prince stolen from his kingdom and sold into slavery. Now, before his capture, Sori was West African royalty, heir to one of the most powerful kingdoms in Africa, Futa Jallon, which is modern-day Guinea. After enduring the Middle Passage, he found himself on a Mississippi plantation, pleading with a man named Thomas Foster not to purchase him. He tried to explain who he was, that he was never meant to be there. But Foster did not believe him. As a matter of fact, Foster mocked him and gave him the nickname Prince, a name that Sori would carry for the next 40 years. Sori had been kidnapped by enemy troops in 1788. The prince, trained in politics and war, was sold to European slave traders for just a few muskets and some rum. At the height of the transatlantic slave trade, 80,000 Africans were sold into slavery every year. Few stories were even kept, especially Muslim slaves like Sori. But Sori was different. Ibn Sori was an educated aristocrat who had studied in Timbuktu. He spoke 5 languages and once commanded an army of over 2,000 men. That intelligence and strategic thinking would later make him a national figure. His story gives us a rare insight to the cruelty of slavery and the cunningness that some enslaved people use to navigate it. His journey would eventually involve U.S. President Quincy Adams and even the Sultan of Morocco. When Sori was sold in Natchez, a Spanish territory at the time, he was marched to a rough frontier homestead. It was nothing like Timbo, the elegant capital where his father ruled. Foster, his enslaver, was uneducated and ignorant about cotton, but Sori wasn't. He knew the crop well from back home. Still, Foster cut off his hair, a symbol of royalty in Futa Jallon, and forced him into slave labor. This wasn't just violence, it was symbolic humiliation. Sori ran away, and for weeks he evaded slave hunters and ignored wanted posters, but eventually he made a painful decision. He could not return home. Not now, maybe, not ever. In the present, he was no longer considered a prince, no longer a commander. If he wanted to regain his dignity, it would have to come from mastering the world that he was in. So Sori returned, but not as a broken man, as a strategist. Back at the plantation, Sori would leverage his knowledge to transform Foster's cotton operation. Under his guidance, it flourished. Sori became a foreman, and that gained him some privileges. And in that time, he also met Isabella, a midwife, who was also enslaved by Foster. Together, they would have 9 children, 5 sons and 4 daughters. Sori was then allowed to sell vegetables at the local market, and that's what fate would strike again. While at the market, Sori ran into someone unexpectedly. It was a British surgeon by the name of John Cox. You see, decades earlier, Cox had been shipwrecked off of the West African coast and was rescued by Sori's family in Timbo. He was stunned to see Sori, heir to a kingdom, and who had helped save his life, now enslaved in Mississippi. Cox tried to buy Sori's freedom, but Foster refused because Sori was too valuable. Still, Cox's efforts sparked something bigger. The story of someone of royalty being enslaved caught the attention of a local newspaper editor. He was intrigued, especially since Sori could write in Arabic. Assuming that Sori was Moroccan, the editor leaned into an idea and Sori didn't correct him. See, Sori understood how America worked. Perception was power, so he played the role. Sori then asked the editor, whose name was Marschalk, to help send a letter to Africa. The letter eventually reached the Sultan of Morocco. Outraged that a Moroccan subject was being held as a slave, the Sultan contacted the U.S. government. The Secretary of State, Henry Clay, then arranged for Sori's release in 1828. But there was a condition, that he had to leave immediately and to never return there as a free man. Sori refused to leave his family, but the arrangements to return to Africa had begun. As the crowds gathered to see the Moroccan royal who could read or write, Marschalk gave him a traditional costume, and Sori leaned into the performance. He began fundraising through public appearances to buy his family's freedom. He managed to purchase Isabella's, but not yet his children. Sori appealed to President John Quincy Adams, but he was declined. Still, another powerful man by the name of Thomas Gallaudet took notice, and Thomas was a pioneering educator and advocate. Now Sori's journey from prince to enslavement to strategist to showman was far from over. You know, this story makes me think. We don't always choose our circumstances, but we do choose how we respond. Sori was an heir when he arrived, and he stayed one even when no one acknowledged him as such. Sometimes the world will try to rename you and restrain you and even erase you, but your identity isn't up for sale. I think about my own life. There were moments when I had to remember who I was, not based on title, but on truth. Have you ever had to reclaim your identity in a place that tried to strip it from you? Well, if this story moved you, please share it with someone else who needs to hear it. And if you've ever had to stand in your true name, write the words "Still Royal" in the comments. Hit the subscribe button for more untold stories that awaken your spirit, and join our private Facebook group, because there we go deeper and we talk real history about real healing and real power. Now, on a final note, Sori was resilient and he returned back to Africa with his wife. Unfortunately, he died shortly thereafter. Now, we are reclaiming our past and rewriting our future, but that begins with remembering who we are. A book that I recommend in this video is called Prince Amongst Slaves by N.H. Senzaya. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.